Welcome to the Expat Life Germany podcast. I'm your host, Sean Behrens, and this week I will be sitting down with a stay-at-home mum from Australia who's living in Germany, and we discuss being a stay-at-home mum. We also discuss having creative goals and aligning them with being a parent, and also with being an expat in Germany, where it's maybe not so easy to change careers and pursue something creative, for example, freelancing or writing. We also discuss the unique situation that her child has, in that she is growing up in a house with an Australian mum, so English mother, a German and Italian father, and growing up in a German culture. And so we discuss the approach to language learning in a complex situation like that. So this week's guest on the podcast is someone from Australia originally, and who's been living in Germany for 8 years. How are you doing, Natalie?
Good. It's a perfect summer's day. We're all melting.
A little too perfect.
Yeah.
Actually, in the middle of a heat wave here.
Yeah.
And you reached out to me through the Be On The Show page on my website. And you're literally one of only 2 guests to do that. You realize that? So you can be like Natalie. Reach out to me on Be On The Show and you can be on the show. So you're Australian. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you know how many Australians are living in Germany?
I don't.
How many other Australians do you know in Nuremberg?
I could probably count them on one hand, actually.
Yeah, I know 2. No, well, 3 now. 3 Australians now, with you.
Yes, I made it to the list. And I probably know that have sort of continuously been here, 1 or 2 as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a total of 13,500, which surprised me because I expected a lot more. I think there's over 100,000 Americans living in Germany, so there are a lot of them here, and a lot of UK people.
Yeah.
And only 6,000 South Africans.
Oh, where are you guys?
Yeah, we're scarce. Very, very scarce. So what do you do here in Germany?
At the moment, I'm a stay-at-home mum, so that's pretty much my permanent fixture at the moment. My daughter is 2.5 now. So I guess it's been like almost 3 years that I've been at home with her. Okay. But the 5 years prior to that was teaching English with a company that sort of folded just as I was going into my maternity leave. Okay. So it was kind of, I don't know, perfect timing. Yeah. Kind of. Yeah. There was nothing for me to go back to, I guess, quote unquote, go back to. But I think it's worked out for the best. I certainly am content, I guess, with how that's worked out. Yeah. I think if there was, this maybe pressure or something to go back to, I probably would have gone back, at least part-time or full-time or something along those lines, because I think I am a slight workaholic, or at least I was. Okay. And I think having a kid has really allowed me to slow down. But that's going off on a tangent.
That's fine. Tangents are welcome.
Good, then I am welcome.
And you're expecting number 2?
Yeah.
So I guess there's no plans to return to work anytime soon.
No. Yeah. I mean, this is where it's at, and it's a kind of an interesting place to be as well.
Things change when you have a kid, and the whole kind of context changes.
Yeah, and I think you're advocating for somebody who doesn't speak at all, and especially specifically to do with speaking on behalf of somebody else, unless my husband is there, which is not always the case. I'm the one on the front line. I have to advocate for her, and I have to go through a doctor's appointment and say what I think and express myself, and it's not always easy, but it certainly has kind of, in an odd way, improved my German. Okay. And I feel like I'm almost using it more than I did when I was, commuting and kind of living my day-to-day sort of childless and free. I think now I'm using it way more, and
Okay. What was your, before we're going to get more to your present day in Germany, and I want to find out more about all that stuff, but what was your background in Australia? What was Natalie before she came to Germany?
Oh, goodness. Well, I was born and raised in Melbourne, and one of 5 kids, to immigrant parents.
Right.
Grew up in the western suburbs of Melbourne, and then sort of found, I guess, a bit of a passion through my teens with acting and dancing and singing and musical theatre. And it still is something that I really love. At least having a creative outlet is something that I really love to have.
You still sing and do shows? Not just in the shower?
For my 2.5-year-old, yes, I do. A lot of singing and dancing and prancing, yes. Yeah, so I grew up kind of in the theatre world and decided to go to uni and do performing arts. As I was finishing uni, sort of realised that I would have to make money somehow to survive. And started working as a travel agent. And I got into tour guiding. And so I moved to the Outback, actually.
Okay.
When I was about 24. So, yeah, I'm hitting my sort of mid-20s and thinking, what am I doing with my life? And
quarter-life crisis time.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I guess so, if I look on it now. But it was really pivotal in that it's a beautiful part of the world. Like, it absolutely... I'm not much of a nature buff or anything like that, but I think out there I really had a sense of, I guess, what people call like oneness with nature. It was really cool. Like there's only about maybe 900 to 1,000 people that service the tourism industry out there. Yeah. Sort of Uluru. If you've heard of Ayers Rock, Uluru.
Ayers Rock, yeah.
Yeah, Kings Canyon is out there, and a place called Katajuda. There's all of rock formations. Mm. And my ultimate goal was to kind of work in tourism but travel the world. Yeah. Or at least come through to Europe. And there I was sort of squirreling away money as well on the side. And at some point in that year, I met my now husband. Right. Who was on a completely different tour.
Oh, he wasn't on your tour?
No, he wasn't on my tour. That's a no-go in the tour guide.
That's the rule one of tour guiding. No fraternizing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Not with the guests, anyway. Mind you, my tours were mostly sort of like an older sort of generation. So, right. Yes, exactly. Although I don't mind an older...
Right, we are really digressing.
Yes,
now, so
exactly.
Let's pull this one back.
Yeah, let's come back.
I feel like we're about to get to know Natalie very well.
So, yeah, this bloke, I guess, this kind of odd-looking guy who was wearing a funny T-shirt that said, looking for the perfect woman, was on this tour. He was helping a friend of his with his motorbike touring business. Mm-hmm. So my husband is a sort of mechanic by trade, and he thought he would get away from life and bad relationships and do what he always wanted to do, which was see Australia. Mm. And in the middle of the desert in 2010, if I remember correctly, I'm really bad with this stuff. We met really randomly on this sort of in the middle of this canyon in the Outback, and I made a joke about his T-shirt, and he seemed to think that, well, he now says that my laughter was intoxicating or whatever it was, and he decided to follow our tour group through the canyon. And
which could be a little creepy.
Yes, could be, in the desert. Yes, if anybody knows these Wolf Creek sort of stories. No, it was all very harmless and very cute. Yeah, and at the end of this tour, he asked me for... I think we had taken a picture together because I made a joke about his T-shirt, right, and something along those lines, and he asked for my email address. And so, very long story short, we started contacting each other and... Yeah, fell in love.
The rest is history, I guess.
Yeah. At one point, I just went, I'm not into long-distance relationships. I'm moving to Germany. I didn't ask his permission.
As one does.
Yes, I wasn't going to ask if he was okay with that. But he had to kind of come back here. And I think we had really established at the very beginning that neither of us were playing games or being false or anything like that. And sort of made it very clear. I think it was very clear to the both of us that we were, if this was something, then then it was we were in for the long haul. So I came out on a working holiday visa for about a year, thinking that's a good amount of time to see if it'll work. Yeah.
the country and the relationship.
Yeah, I, to be honest with you, I didn't even. This sounds really ridiculous, and in hindsight, I think if my daughter did this, I would have a few words with her. But yeah, I in hindsight, I guess it was a bit of a not a rush decision, but it was. I didn't think of language barrier or even cultural differences. I was more concerned that there was a relationship that could work.
Right.
And of course, I was already sort of in the back of my head thinking at one point in my life, I would love to see Europe and travel through. And that squirreled away money just happened to be kind of sitting there. So it kind of, again, maybe a bit of perfect timing in that it sort of worked out. And when I got here, I certainly was a bit naive about fitting in and I guess, but I guess again in the back of my head, it was always sort of just a year or just a couple of years or just 3 years or just you know.
And you guys are still around so many years later.
Yeah. So going on 9, I suppose at some point.
You are bad with these dates, aren't you?
Oh yeah, I am. Actually, I do regularly check my wedding ring for the engraved date of my anniversary. I literally take on the role of the man, I think, sometimes. Forgetting dates.
Okay, so you met your now husband, decided on a whim just about to move over to Germany and Europe. You'd never been to Europe or Germany.
I had never been, so I'd spent sort of there was about 3 months that I lived in Scotland and did the Fringe Festival and with sort of theatre stuff. But not the continent. Yeah. Not at all. Yeah.
So how was your German when you moved across?
I laugh at the at the memory, literally non-existent. I mean, if I think about it, I probably could count to 10. I did some sort of learn German in 30 days before I got out here, but you just that does not prepare you for a thing. I think I knew how to order a coffee,
which is pretty important.
In my life, absolutely, it's sort of priority number one. But even then, I remember vividly trying to do that on my own, like order a coffee on my own the first time I got here. And this poor kid, I just remember he was fairly pale, so he did turn bright red when I was kind of stuttering and was sweating and trying to ask for a coffee in German. And you could see that he wanted to sort of help me, but he himself was petrified of speaking English.
Right.
So we were both just red-faced and sweating and not really, and just a ridiculous moment in my life. And God bless him. But we tried, and I got my coffee and whatever it was that I.
But it's amazing how you remember those situations and those people decades later. Sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it was monumental because it was really the first time, and I was patting myself on the back, thinking like, how cool am I? I'm going to go order a coffee and then get there and just be, a sopping mess because I had no idea. I would get through one word or once, and I could just see he was struggling with me and, but trying to be helpful and nice at the same time. Poor thing.
Poor thing.
Yeah.
He's a middle-aged man now somewhere. Thinking back to that day where he couldn't understand the coffee order.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure his English is great.
Yeah. So did you start learning German immediately?
Yeah, almost immediately. I think I remember getting a phone call when I was in Australia, and my then boyfriend called me from Germany, and I think he might have been here for about, I don't know, I kind of remember a couple of months before I came out, and he said, look, there's a course starting just sort of a week or two after you arrived. Do you want me to book you in? And it's literally just across the way here, so that was very convenient. And so I think fairly early on, I did these intensive courses that they offer you at the sort of community colleges, that they have around in the cities and stuff. That's another ball game as well. That's intensive courses. You're there from 9 till 1 o'clock, and they just throw everything at you, which is great for learning a lot, but also for forgetting a lot. You have to really keep on top of it. And my luck, or I don't know, Pech in German, bad luck, was that I got a job in a sort of a restaurant, a cafe, sort of close by as well. Sort of, I think about a month after I got here, and I had to put into action everything that I was learning, and that's again another a whole different ball game, because all of a sudden everything you're learning in theory is suddenly has to be thrown into practice, and that is, they're worlds apart when you're learning a language. So that was a huge learning curve for me as well.
But it's good to be thrown in the deep end like that.
In some ways, absolutely. I think that I then subsequently went into other courses where people were sort of like, how are you speaking Germans? And I think I really had to put it down to being thrown in the deep end. I was cushioned a little bit in that job as well, because I think one cook was Irish but had been living here for 20 years or something, and so we could kind of sneak off for a smoke and a drink and have a chat. So there was some sort of leeway, I guess, or some sort of reprieve. But there were, moments of really feeling like the immigrant, who just kind of got here, and I compare it to Manuel from Fawlty Towers, this sort of no problem, Mr. Fawlty, and I was literally saying kein Problem, no problem the whole time.
It's almost comical,
and feeling really unintelligent, which I don't want to sound like I have a huge ego, but in English I can be quite. I can articulate what I want and express my feelings and have nuance. And when you're learning a language, there is no nuance.
And it takes a lot of time before you get to that point.
And I still don't know if I am there. 8 years down the track. So at the beginning there was a huge feeling of, I feel stupid. I feel like everybody thinks I'm dumb, or at least incapable of. Saying anything other than okay and kein Problem,
I can 100% relate, because that's exactly how I felt for, I think, pretty much the first 5 years that I was in Germany, is because, and that also impacts how easily you can connect with the Germans around you, because they're not seeing the best you. They're seeing some kind of, and like you say, I've always had the feeling that they think I'm the dumbest person under the sun. And maybe I'm not that smart, but I'm smarter than I'm coming across right now. And I rely a lot on humor as well when I talk to people, and when I speak to German, that whole aspect of my personality was just taken away when I was learning. So I didn't have that to fall back on, and then I'm like,
And I think with Australians, I'm not sure how it is with South Africa, but I know the Brits and the Australians, we tend to, if I may, take the piss out of ourselves. We're always taking the mickey out of ourselves. And without being able to do that, making mistakes and being able to laugh at yourself is really hard. For me, that was probably one of the hardest things. Just being able to kind of say, hey, with the German, sort of, we all make mistakes, haha, but there's all that nuance is gone.
It is. You can't do things like, of course I would do something like that. That's just a typical me thing, because it doesn't translate, and if you try, it comes across really strangely as well.
And then there's the blank face, and Germans are not afraid to give you a blank face and think and show you that they're thinking, what the heck are you talking about? They're not afraid to be quite direct in that regard either. And then again, maybe after the first 5 years, you've sort of gotten to the place where you feel like you can express at least a bit more detail or a bit more nuance. And then you learn that the humor is completely different. And then you've got a whole nother sort of level of understanding that you've got to deal with as well. So, I mean, it's really interesting, the evolution of coming here and feeling like everything's amazing. And I think maybe all expats go through it. They're like, everything's amazing, especially, Australian or probably South Africans says, wow, look at all the history and the castles.
All these buildings and the cute churches.
My God, that painting is older than Australia, in terms of European settlement, wow. Yeah. And then you get to the point where, okay, you've kind of got things in your stride. You're just trying to, you're out of survival mode. Things you can kind of decide in which direction you're going, and then you start to realize, gosh, there's a lot of bureaucracy in Germany. Gosh, they don't laugh very much, do they? Sometimes? Oh wow, Franconians, we are in Franconia, sort of this sort of humor is really hard to break through, or that just breaking the ice with Franconians can be quite hard. Sometimes they're very well known for that. So you start hitting these really, I guess, as you become more nuanced in the language, your understanding of the culture becomes more nuanced as well. And then there's a point where you start tearing out your hair.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah, what am I doing?
yeah.
Did you find that you went back to Australia sometimes and just was so wonderful just to hear English around you and hear like little snippets of conversation? I can remember walking through a supermarket in South Africa and hearing just like, oh, I understand what they're talking about. And I'm not even listening to the conversations and I can hear what they're talking about. This is amazing. And it was just like, sometimes you just need that break to get away from German.
Especially as an English teacher, I almost felt like I was, you feel dumb in one language, but then you start realizing that even in your mother tongue, you're just losing vocabulary and you're trying to teach English to people who want to know how native English speakers speak.
Yeah.
And you have to explain, or you have to kind of, explain how you think it would work in in Australia, for example. You would say, well, we say it like this, or we would express ourselves like that. And then you start doubting yourself because it's been years since you've been back, in my case, with Australia. Or it's been years since you've hung out, with people who've just come from the mother country. And I know it's so embarrassing sometimes. And I had this conversation with actually a friend of mine just the other day. We would go home or go to the UK because I guess it's kind of closer than Australia, but kind of walk into shops and where you would normally just not want to talk to a shop assistant. You're just like, I'm fine, thank you, I can look on my own. This time you're just like,
help me, hello, tell me about your childhood.
Wow, this is a great shop. How long have you been working here? Like, because you can all of a sudden just be really chatty and I know I've gotten off of a plane in sort of Stansted in London and just want to talk to the ground staff because I'm like, because you understand me.
And you're laughing at my jokes. Come here.
Come here, you. Yeah.
I also found when I went back, something strange was happening is that if I had to go into a bank or a shop or something, I would start preparing my head. What do I have to say to them and start planning?
Right.
And I'm like, no, I don't. Because if they're speaking English, I can just go in. But here, every time, especially in the early days, every time I started a conversation in a store, I would have to prepare it before I went in. Like, okay, this is what I'm going to say in German. This is what they're probably going to answer. And then it's a whole planning process that happens.
And then see, I had almost, I think I learned very quickly, not very quickly, but maybe in the first year, how not to plan because I would sweat so much, like be so nervous standing in a queue to pay at the cash desk or whatever, that I was anxious. I was, I had an anxiety problem. I was just standing in line trying to rehearse in my head, and then I'd get there and not produce anything near what I had in my head.
Yeah.
So I kind of had to cut it out. Like I had to sort of just go in there and trust my instincts. I mean, it failed more times than I succeeded, but now I succeed more times than I fail, I guess.
Yeah.
Or at least I'm not beating myself up after.
And I think that's the important part, is that you just kind of, when you start to relax about it, and then it becomes easier because you can kind of adapt to the situation as it is. But I often think about people with anxiety problems or something, because this is the kind of thing that really, even I get anxiety, and I'm not prone to anxiety attacks or anything, but the language can do that to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I don't think I necessarily have an anxiety problem, but I know that I certainly have more of sort of, I guess I understand anxiety a lot more after kind of living here for 8 years. Yeah. Even driving is like monumental sometimes because in South Africa, do you drive on the other side?
The left-hand side of the road,
yeah.
That's a big change.
Yeah, and also everything is so narrow here that I feel like, I'm just going to hit everything. And until now, toy, I haven't, hit everything, but sometimes, not yet. Sometimes I really feel like there needs to be more road, more like wide open parking spaces here because it's just
everything
ridiculous.
Especially here in the Innenstadt, in the in Nuremberg Central, it's really narrow. I hate driving in Nuremberg.
Yeah, and I have a lot of anxiety coming home around like 4:30, 5 o'clock because I know it's just
You said your parents were immigrants, first generation immigrants.
Yeah.
From where?
So they immigrated from South America, Uruguay.
Okay.
In the 70s to Sydney, and then they moved to Melbourne.
Okay.
And I was born, about 10 years after they immigrated. So, 85.
Okay.
I'm giving away my age.
The people are working on the calculator. Like,
Well, I was going to say maybe there could be another 85, but then that would just leave 1885. Yeah.
Which is less desirable.
Yeah, not doing me any favors. So all my brothers and sisters were born, so in Australia, in Melbourne. So we're all we would call, like first generation Australians. Okay. Yeah.
All right. So, and then your husband was also born in Germany, but is not. He's not also officially second generation, you could say.
Yeah. So his parents immigrated sort of through the 60s to Germany after. Yeah.
So you have similar backgrounds as a.
Yeah. When he gave me his email address, I saw, .de, and I didn't even know. Look, this is how educated I was at the time. I didn't even know what .de was, but I kind of had an inkling that it was Deutschland, Yeah. And so and I remember one of the first questions was, what is your background? I guess it's a very typically Australian thing to ask as well.
Right.
Because we're all kind of from somewhere.
Yeah.
So that was one of, actually, you're right, one of the sort of common things that we talked about when we first met.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So then you moved here with him, and then you got certified to teach English. So while you were working in the kitchen, then you got your English certification.
So can I tell this story? Because it's come
please,
full, it's totally come full circle since 8 years ago. So I was working in that kitchen, and I thought, look, I'm not going to be able to stay here longer than a year if I'm not working for a business that will sort of sponsor me to stay. And I knew I wanted to stay, and at least my now husband, I guess he wanted me to stay. Otherwise, like, what am I doing here? So we kind of decided, we're in for the long haul. And I kind of had to start thinking about ways. This sounds really like conniving, like I had to figure it out, how I could stay here. But it was literally that process that I was thinking, and I knew a few people sort of through, siblings and friends and, sort of relatives that with teaching English, you could get jobs in foreign countries and teach English. Yeah. So I thought, you know what, if that's an avenue, let me explore. And at the same time, randomly at the school I was learning German, I ran into a girl from Melbourne. And we sort of started chatting in the corridor. And she was just in the next classroom over, also learning German. And we sort of met at the vending machine, and she told me about herself. And that she had got certified in Melbourne before she came out here. And I was, I started talking to her saying, I'm thinking about this. And she said, I did it. And there's certain hoops you have to jump through. And so we discussed it. And I don't know if she was working at the time or she was about to start working and start teaching. So it was certainly that kind of pivotal moment of inspiration. And then I went home and literally booked an online correspondence course. Yeah. And found out that there's a sort of a 20, I think the course is about 110 hours of study, or was it 140, something along those lines, and 20 of those hours have to be sort of one-on-one or face-to-face with the teacher. Yeah, so I did the TEFL course online.
Okay. There was never any doubt in those times that you didn't want to stay here? You never had a time when you're like, I could go back to Australia?
It's really funny. I mean, it's a good question. I don't think I let it sort of enter my mind in some respects. In other respects, I am very content here. So it very much feels like home. We went back for a wedding, I think maybe it was after the first year that I was here. And I remember by the end of that trip, I was like, I want to go home, and it was, I was already calling it home, which is weird. I was like, I want my bed and, I want my stuff. And and even though we weren't that well established here, it was home. It was already sort of in my head as home. And I think it's only now that I've had my daughter and the family element and the friendship element is sort of, I guess I feel like, maybe I want my family a bit more because of Sophia, and I want maybe the childhood that I had for her. So there's a lot of that contemplating of, and comparing of childhoods. Yeah, but that's maybe another conversation as well, because that's the only time that I've ever sort of thought, oh, I would go back to kind of give Sophia the childhood that I had in terms of like wide open spaces and the schooling,
beautiful beaches and weather
and poisonous spiders and
poisonous
snakes.
spiders and because who wouldn't want that for their children?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's a good threat,
spiders
isn't it?
the size of small children. Yeah,
it's like, do your homework or
or I'll feed you to the spiders outside. Jesus.
Yeah. Come on, toughen up.
All right, so Australian Parenting 101. What has been your approach to your daughter's language learning? Do you speak both languages at home? First of all, does your husband, is he fluent in Italian?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so he is bilingual. German, Italian?
Oh, he's annoyingly multilingual.
These people. Also English, I guess.
So English, Italian, German, and because he had a Spanish girlfriend for 15 years, so and Italian and Spanish are kind of similar, so he's fluent in Spanish.
Okay.
And which was great for my parents. My parents loved that.
Sure.
So that was slightly impressive and sort of won them over.
This one's a keeper.
Yeah, exactly. He speaks our language. And through that, then he has family in Brazil. So then Portuguese comes into play. It's annoying. He can just, he adapts so well with languages. I can't even get German right, and he's
just waffling off in languages you didn't even know he could speak.
But he's like, this is he's a bit of a freak in terms of
in a nice way.
In a nice way. In a sort of like, he's got a gift for languages, and I hope my daughter has it. That would be amazing. So we sort of tackled it in that I knew I wanted to get my daughter Sophia to have as much English as possible before she hits kindergarten.
Right.
So I've sort of maybe selfishly just inundated her with English.
Okay.
So Tony, my husband, he's responsible for the Italian, and so are her grandparents who live here in Nuremberg. Because they're sort of they're of that generation that sort of didn't really learn German, or they learned it on the street, so it's not perfect German, and English is pretty much not an option for them. So they've got the Italian that they're responsible for representing, or modeling good Italian for her.
Right.
The problem is my husband and I started speaking English to each other in Australia. So through my German learning, through everything, we have tried to speak other languages. It's just we always go back to English. It's
That's interesting.
Yeah,
it just comes back to that all the time.
It's just bad habits. He certainly like, he'll sort of try to teach her, but teach her Italian, and she knows a few words, and she'll follow sort of, I guess, orders, if, for lack of a better word. She'll sort of, he'll say, "Oh, come on, let's wash our hands" in Italian, and she'll follow. Just responding in Italian is not quite there yet, but I'm kind of okay with that, because I know she'll have a strong English foundation, a strong German foundation will start happening at kindergarten, and I'm cool with that. And I don't know, it just seems like, I don't know if we would be that accepting in Australia, but it seems like every kindergarten we kind of looked at, or anybody we've talked to about it, have just been totally okay with them starting to learn German at kindergarten. So it's really nice to know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
When you reached out to me to be on the podcast, you mentioned that you love to connect with stay-at-home moms.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'm too in touch. No, there's a lot of Facebook groups that seem to be sort of functioning out of Nuremberg. So there's like Hen House and Nuremberg Bumps and Babies, and the Bumps and Babies, and then Toddlers and Kids. And so there's that online presence. But to be honest with you, I think one of the main reasons I kind of connected with the mums through Facebook was because I wanted a play group, or a sort of Krabbelgruppe in that sense.
Yeah.
And I found one sort of close by that I now run. So I'm really sort of I'm deeply rooted in the expat community here, because so many women contact me to join that play group. And so then I'm sort of dealing with way more people than I thought I ever would be in my stay-at-home mom time, and it's great. Like, I think in the end there are too many possibilities for us. Like, there are, I have to turn down invitations for a play date or something, because we're busy, we're doing stuff with Sophia, but then we get invited to somebody's backyard to go use their slide or whatever, which is lovely. And I think we all want the similar thing of having a community that then reinforces the language, with the kids, so that they're hearing English, they're exposed to that. I think we all have sort of some kind of fear that the kids are just going to drop English at some point.
Yeah, it
strangely.
is a fear. It is a fear, and I think it could happen because I've also seen with my daughter, she's starting to prefer German. So she'll start discussions in German, or she started to ask to watch Peppa Pig in German. I'm like, no, not in my house, not under my roof.
Yeah, I know. There's a strange kind of protectiveness that comes over you. Yeah,
it's weird.
A friend of mine said it I always say the other day, but I think it was actually quite a few months ago. And she said, it's going to be so weird when, Sophia starts speaking German, because it'll be like she's a different person. And it's kind of true. I don't know if you've had this feeling where you're almost curious to hear what somebody sounds like, quote unquote, in the other language they speak.
Yeah.
It's almost as if their voice changes or part of them changes, and which kind of brings me to I guess maybe a broader discussion about language being culture as well, which, ex-English teacher, I guess that's kind of fascinating. But at the end of the day, I think it is kind of like that with the kids. I feel like that. Sophia's just sort of on the cusp of, speaking German. She's starting, because she attends a small group in German 3 days a week. She's starting to sing her songs in German. And I don't know the songs, and we always sing together, know. And so now Dad has to sort of say, I remember that song from my childhood. And it's like, well, actually, I want her to remember songs from my childhood.
Yes. Stop singing that at once.
Yeah. But I guess maybe it's an irrational fear that their personality changes. You don't know who they are, in some kind of primitive, weird way, that they kind of become someone different. Even they don't, but you don't know to what extent the culture and the language is shaping their identities and moving away from everything that you know and hold dear. And as a parent, of course, the one thing you want is control, which you never have.
No, you don't. And I guess it's just one of those things that we have to learn to deal with, but it's not an easy thing. It's
not an easy thing. And I like I said, that's why I was kind of happy not to sort of force the Italian thing. Even though we had kind of decided from the beginning that Tony would model the Italian and I would model the English, and it's turned out that we both model the English, which is fine. and like I said, I'm okay with that. I think if anything, I want her to have a really strong base in that, so that eventually one day she might think it's uncool or whatever, and then eventually find out actually it is cool to have that, to have that foundation. And fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Yay!
Now, I know a lot of people who were into theatre or who have musical talent, and a lot of these people just have it in their blood. Is that the case with you? Do you miss being on stage and belting out the stage tunes?
Yes, absolutely. And I think, I think I always have, and I always will. That's a really weird phrase, but I find that I think at the end of the day, it comes down to just being creative, full stop. Yeah. So one of the reasons why I contacted you as well, because I find the podcast medium a creative outlet as well, and just as entertaining and as rich as going to the theatre or watching a film or reading a book. So it's an entertainment medium as well as an informative one and educational, etc. But I guess what I found through the sort of chameleon-like things that I've done in my life, they've always linked back to being creative. There's always been something going on. The creativity is within, and I think you know, a lot of creative people can kind of go mad if they don't have an outlet. That's me, number one. If I don't have something, then I tend to either find it and then like find too many things to do and sort of, you know, like crash and burn at some point, which is great too. That's great kind of stress to have, or I go a little bit mad. And that's not healthy for my relationship. No. So I need to find little things.
You have to find those outlets.
Yeah.
What about, let's say, 3 or 4 years down the line when the new kid's there? Mm-hmm. Will you rethink the stay-at-home mum thing? And if you do, what are your options to building that creativity that it looks like you need?
Yeah, that's a very, very, very good question, because it not only is it something I like think about at the moment, it's something I almost have to stop myself thinking about, because otherwise I might go a bit mad. So now that I've got number 2 on the way, it's I really need to concentrate on number 2. So he without a name, but. Yeah, if I've had this conversation a couple of times with other mothers. Sorry, you're not the first to ask the question. Yes, sorry. And we're all in similar situations in that at some point we're going to want to go back to work.
Sure.
And if that is a fulfilling position in terms of our hobby / creative / passion, and if that's possible in a country like Germany, in a state like Bavaria, which is quite conservative. So I think there's multiple issues here. One is now we're mothers, so we kind of think, well, it's not about us anymore to some degree. So it's like, you know, get a job, work your 9 to 5 or whatever it is, your 8 till 1, and go home and spend your time with your kids, because that's what's important, you know. There's that element. There's the element of living in quite a conservative state where... unlike Australia, everything is about qualification on paper. And it's kind of scary coming from Australia, where you can talk yourself into a job. You can almost, like, you know, you can go into an interview and say, look, buddy, I'm the best person for this.
I don't have the papers, but I'm the right person.
Give me a chance. And
it's more difficult in Bavaria and Germany.
Yeah, absolutely. And where they want to see a piece of paper, and everybody sort of asks you that question, what are you? But they mean, what did you study and what did you qualify to be? And it's very hard to sort of do anything outside of the label that you're in, or you're categorized in. So, and I certainly went for job interviews when I was an English teacher, looking at different avenues or different places, and I got that question like, why are you changing? Like, what's, you know, like, why would you ever do that? Like, what possesses you to even think about doing something outside of your sphere of qualification or skill? So there's that element as well. And I guess, there's those 2 elements of, you're a mum now, do you really need to kind of be following something that you're absolutely passionate about, when you can just kind of make the money, come home, you know, look after the kids.
And focus on the family.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's a kind of a female issue as well. I mean, there's another side of me that thinks, well, why should I have to sacrifice career, you know, for motherhood? I mean, there's a whole bunch of questions there, and a whole bunch of elements that come into play. At the end of the day, I would love to do something that I'm passionate about. I would love to, I would love to write and work from home. You know, that's the dream, I guess, you know, to be flexible enough for your kids as well as for your own creativity. But the reality is, you got to pay the bills, and I guess it comes full circle again. You know, the arts are not exactly, the place that you're going to earn a great amount of money.
No, you can earn. I think the benefit that English speakers have in this country is there's a lot of international companies that are looking for freelance writers or translators and so on. So that does put you at an advantage. But again, it's not going to be, you have to work really hard as well to get to a point where you can sustain yourself. And
again, being freelance is another, like, it's a whole other thing as well.
Yeah,
like,
it is.
If I wanted to go back into teaching, which I very well could, I mean, I don't know that I'm particularly, I think I might have done my 5 years, might have done my time for my crimes.
Time to move along.
and that's the other thing as well. I have another friend who we're very similar personality types that we were both kind of comparing and saying how we're not necessarily people who would stay in the same job for 40 years or 20 years, even, that we're sort of, jack of all trades and like to learn new things and like to venture out and explore and see where life takes us and do what makes us happy. Yeah. And not to say that staying in a job for 20 years can't make you happy.
It depends what you like. Some people need that stability.
Exactly. Yeah. And I know my husband is, maybe that's why I married him. We're very different in that respect, in that he loves a stable sort of work environment. And he is the type of person that will work 8 hours and not think, oh gosh, this is not exactly what I'm 100% passionate about. But I get to come home and I get to, come home to my wife and my child and, and that's the quality time that I'm after. And that's where I get my sort of quality of life. I don't know that I'm that kind of person. I think I need something that will,
fulfill you.
Yeah. In that sort of day-to-day thing. I think I need to get something out of it, not just money. It's not just monetary for me. So it's a huge question at the moment, and maybe I'm far too hormonal and pregnant to
maybe just not think about it for a while.
Yeah, I mean, there's a danger in that you sort of put it off. Yeah. And like many women in my circle, we've all kind of talked about, we're here for partners, or we, some of them are on contracts that their partners are on, so they've come out as a family, but the male is the main provider, and they feel like they've put their career on hold. And and if I do stay home for another 3 years with number 2, that's 6 years. I'm out of the field, and that's a long time.
It is.
So, but again, a fairly typical female problem to have. When does a guy ever think like, hey, I'm taking 6 years off?
And that's true.
And then I have to find my footing again in my career, my path.
Yeah,
it's such a complicated issue.
It is
on so many different levels. And so I think the short answer to your question is I don't know.
I don't know, and that's it, folks. But that's it. I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, I kind of, in some weird sort of strange, I don't even know how to explain it, and I don't want to make it sound superstitious or spiritual or anything like that, because I'm not that way inclined, but I kind of feel like, I've used the term perfect timing a couple of times in this conversation, and it just feels like, I mean, again, toy, maybe that's superstitious. Yeah. But like, things have sort of worked out to the point of satisfaction, like I'm pretty happy with where we are as a family, where I am right now. Yeah. And I think knowing myself, I will always find a creative outlet. I mean, I reached out to you on an email page thing, so yeah.
And the podcast didn't even exist at that point. It was just like a phantom thing. I was like, oh my God, does she even know that it doesn't exist yet?
I have so much faith in you.
I'm like, oh my God, there's a lot of pressure.
No, in the podcast medium, it's brilliant. I think it's like I said, I think I mentioned to you earlier, I spoke with somebody and said, I would love to start a podcast because I really love podcasts. We just kind of went, but we don't have anything to talk about. And and I mean, that's maybe another issue with creative people, that self-criticism, that self-doubt,
the voice inside your head that's always going, what? That's not genuine.
Nobody wants to listen to you.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah,
exactly.
But kudos, man. Absolutely, that you're doing it. I mean,
thanks.
And thank you for letting me be part of it as well.
Thank you for reaching out, and it's been a great discussion. And cool. Thanks for having me over.
No, thank you.
So that was my talk with Natalie from Australia, and she got on the show by going to expatlifegermany.de and clicking Be on the Show. And you can too. Go and do that if you want to be interviewed on Expat Life Germany, or if you have a topic idea or anything, just get in touch with me through the form on that page and I will get in touch with you. Next week, it's just me. I will be discussing several things, including some of the topics that have come up in the past few interviews of the last few weeks. I will also be announcing the winners of the From the Bürgeramt to the Bedroom books that I was giving away. Now, I've emailed the winners, but one of you hasn't checked your emails, or it's ended up in your spam folder. So check your spam folder, check your emails if you did enter the competition. Maybe you're a winner. Maybe you are. I don't know. Check it out and download the episode next week. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to it. I will talk to you next week.